Dear guests who have joined us for this occasion, it's great honor and pleasure for me to welcome at the College Director General Themis CHRISTOPHIDOU, who has responsibility for education, youth, sport and culture at the European Commission. Director General CHRISTOPHIDOU has a not so usual element in her CV, and this is that she came to the Commission with a very considerable private sector experience. She graduated in the Athens National Polytechnic with an MSc in civil engineering and had actually responsibility also as a managing director of a construction company. I think it's certainly an advantage, I think, for a senior European Commission official, I would at least say so, to have had substantial private sector experience before she then entered the Commission. After several years of working in the DG for regional policy, Mrs. CHRISTOPHIDOU assumed a career at the top political level in the Commission by a series of senior cabinet functions. She has been a deputy head of cabinet from 2010 to 2011 of Commissioner Androulla Vassiliou. Commissioner Vassiliou had responsibility for education, for higher education, and was really a great supporter of the college, came several times to the College of Europe, so I would just like to mention this. Then from 2011 to 2014, Mrs. CHRISTOPHIDOU was head of cabinet of Commissioner Maria Damanaki, and then from 2014 to 2018, to March 2018 this year, actually, of the cabinet of Commissioner Christos Stylianides. And in March of this year, you assumed then, Director General, the responsibility for education, youth, sports and culture at the head of this Directorate General. Now, these are all subjects of considerable importance for the future. I think it's a very nice responsibility because it's one of the most forward-looking fields of action of the European Commission, of the European Union as a whole. Certainly. At the same time, it's not an easy field of action because the member states retain primary competences in the field. And the European Union can only act, I would say, generally in strict compliance with the subsidiarity principle, and the member states certainly watch closely their competences in the field. As a German, I can only say that in Germany, even the Länder very closely watch that there are no competences in education too much impacted upon by the European Union level. So I think you have daily challenges also in terms of interaction with the member states. The Director General has chosen as a subject for today 197 days before the European elections. The days were carefully calculated by your office, and it came also to me as a reminder how much the elections now actually are approaching. And this is, of course, also very much a subject of considerable importance for the future. Vice President Timmermans yesterday said before an audience that the elections campaign for the European Parliament would be a battle for the very soul of Europe. That's a citation. Now, I don't think that Vice President Timmermans was suggesting that the European Parliament is the soul of the European Union, but I think he is certainly right to say that the results of these elections will be a reflection of the state of the soul of the European citizens. Perhaps not the perfect one, but at least one form of reflection. And it will surely have a major impact on what the European Union can and will deliver in the next legislature. We should not forget, for instance, that it will be the new European Parliament, probably, which will be essentially in charge of implementing the first phase of the new multi-annual financial framework. where there will be crucial votes to be taken in the European Parliament, and also certainly some votes of crucial importance for the education and higher education portfolio. So, Director General, we are very happy that you have agreed to address us on this important subject, and also that you have taken out the time of your busy schedule to join us today. Thanks very much, and I hand over the floor to you.
Actually, I thank you for inviting me here, Rector Molnar. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. May I call you dear students? I really thank you for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today because I have worked with and recruited many students, many graduates from the College of Europe, all top class. So, you know, this already, the assumption that you're all top class in this room is for me given. But I have never had the privilege to study here. So I'm glad that at least I get the opportunity to spend a couple of hours in this university. I come, as you heard from the rector, from a very different background. I am indeed an engineer, and I studied in the Athens Polytechnic, and once upon a time, before you were born, I was building bridges in very remote parts of Greece. I must tell you that I came to Brussels by coincidence. I know that most people would say that they were already with the spoon they were fed in their early childhood. They were fed Europe, but I don't want to claim that. The story is that one day when I was on the construction site wearing my helmet and trying to build a piece of motorway from A to B in Greece, my boss had to come to Brussels to present the progress of our works to the European Commission, because our project was co-funded by the EU, as most infrastructure projects in the whole of Europe. So he asked me to join him, as I was the only person in the team who spoke French. There you have the value of speaking languages. Huh? So 25 years later, here I am in front of you. I don't build bridges anymore in Greece, but I try to build bridges between people in the heart of Europe. And this is what I would like to talk to you about today, about building bridges. Though I left the construction site and I moved into an office, my first job is at DG Regio, Regional Policy DG. That's where the structural funds are being managed, or cohesion policy, we call it also. So at the time, we had what was then the candidate countries, and I worked for Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria in order to help build infrastructure projects for their pre-accession phase. I was still not putting away my construction helmet. I did join the Commission at a very lucky moment. This was the years of preparing for the biggest enlargement of the EU. So I witnessed how West started growing together with the East and the North with the South. For many people, this was a dream that they were seeing come true. The accession of the countries of Central and Eastern Europe and of two small Mediterranean islands, Malta and Cyprus, in 2004-2007, reunited the continent after the fall of the Iron Curtain, extending the area of peace and stability. One of the very first Director Generals in the Commission, whom I admired a lot and who has retired, used to say this was the reunification of geography and the reunification of history. During my years as head of cabinet of Commissioner Damanaki, as the rector mentioned, she was the Commissioner for Fisheries and Maritime Policy, but she was also the Commissioner coming from Greece. So the first disruption started to occur. Europe was entering an economic and a financial crisis. And there was growing a divide between North and South. There was talk of establishing a multi-speed Europe to differentiate the debtors from the creditors. It took a lot of efforts and endless European councils, endless nights. A lot of people were counting the hours that they spent locked up in the Justus Lipsius room in Brussels to put on the table of the European leaders the notion of solidarity, to choose unity and integration over divisions. When I moved on to become the head of cabinet of the Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Management, another big crisis hit Europe, that of the refugee and migration crisis. Our task was twofold: to assist the EU countries that were receiving the biggest pressure from migration flows, and to work with the neighboring countries on the external borders of the EU to help relieve the pressure. For the first time in 2012, we made humanitarian aid available inside the EU. This was never done before. Humanitarian aid was something done in the external parts of the EU. It was for what we call the third world. It was for countries that were not able to deal with the problems of their citizens, of their societies, be it war or be it climate change. And suddenly the European Union had problems of humanitarian aid. So in a matter of days, we put together probably the most fast-track program that has taken place in the EU to allow for the EU to bring humanitarian organizations inside the territory of the Union, the UNHCRs, the Red Cross, and the MSF of this world, to come into the EU territory and help take care of refugees on the very basic needs: shelter, water, food, and then, of course, some basic education, because you cannot leave these people for months or for years without education and then just pick it up. This does not happen. So you have to find ways of providing, even informally, a minimum of an education system for the children, for the youngsters like you. During all my years as a Commission official, in every crisis that we faced, I believe that our fundamental choice was between more EU or no EU at all. Every crisis tested our foundations, and it proved that if we are to continue with this project, we need to build something stronger. Be it a monetary union, a security union, an energy union, the patchwork does not work anymore. No member state can face global challenges alone. A solution can only be a European one. Yes, we now have counted, Mr. Rector, and we have 197 days to the next decision point. And it's not a lot of time, actually, and we have a lot of work to do. But as in psychology, so in politics, crises, even if eventually averted, leave traumas. And the symptoms include anger, denial, confusion, fear, and feeling disconnected. We are all human beings, after all. In political terms, the most ostensive expression of our trauma took the form of Brexit. Much deeper wounds from Europe are those of extremism, increasing inequality, racism, disinformation. I don't have to line them all up for you. You're well placed to know what I'm talking about. We have then a lot to do in 197 days. Realistically, we cannot mend every wound, but we can try to put faith back into citizens that Europe can be the best and the most lasting treatment. President Juncker says, we must show that Europe can overcome differences between North and South, East and West, left and right, because Europe is too small to let itself be divided in halves or in quarters. I can assure you that we're doing our best to do this, in Brussels as well as throughout the Union, because I want us to be all in agreement with this. The EU is not Brussels. The EU is every city and every town and every village from where each of us come. I come from Famagusta. It's a city in the most eastern part of the Union, northern eastern part of the Union. It's a city that now is not accessible to us because it's under occupation, but that's not the point. The point is that that's Europe too, and every place where you come from, it's Europe. Europe is not Brussels. Next May, the European leaders will meet in Sibiu, it's in Romania, in what will effectively be the culmination of a process of extensive consultations with European citizens on the future of Europe. There, the European leaders will take several decisions that will set our path in the next decade and beyond. Yet, a democracy does not satisfy itself with leaders leading and subjects following. We need your help, and we need your voice. I talk to you now not only as the leaders of tomorrow that I see in this room, but also as the young citizens of today. The Commission puts a lot of emphasis on your contribution, especially when it comes to participating in democratic life. Democracy is not just about voting every 4 or 5 years. It is, of course, about that too, but not only about that. We have to participate in democratic life. We have to be active participants in our societies. Europe has certainly made a difference for my generation, in who we are. My generation has worked to sustain Europe as a beacon of peace, prosperity, and solidarity, one that enables young people like you to grow, both personally and within their communities. I have a daughter of your age, and all I've done in my life is fundamentally to offer her a better future, and I am sure that your parents feel the same. Yet, our heritage is clearly in jeopardy today. It is a responsibility of all our generations to defend this heritage. It's a duty for all of us to make a difference in combating myths and putting the facts straight. So I come here with a request for you. I'm asking you to get involved in any way you can, and one way is the campaign, This Time I'm Voting. I don't know if you're aware of this. You are? I see some heads nodding. Many, especially young citizens, are already very active. They're sharing content on the elections, organizing activities, and spreading the message that voting is essential for preserving our democracy. I'm not telling you what to vote. You will vote whatever you want. This is not about your choices, but it's about making a choice. I'm old enough to remember that some things we take as facts of life today were not always a given. There was a time when the 4 European Union freedoms, freedom of people, of goods, of capital, and of services, were not the right for the many, but the privilege for the few. There was a time when Europe was not an inclusive union, but a divided landmass. Let's remember that in a few days, there's a big celebration in Paris on the 100 years from the First World War. It may seem to you like ancient history, but actually your grandparents have lived this war. And your parents have lived the second one. So for them, it's very close to the skin, and I would imagine that they have talked to you about it. We must not take this progress that we have for granted, and we cannot afford to underestimate those who seek to diminish its impact on everybody's life. As much as we cherish the freedoms enabled by Europe, unfortunately, we still haven't managed to create a sense of belonging for Europeans. Van Rompuy, president of the European Council in the previous mandate, whom I understand is also teaching here, President Van Rompuy, said when he was receiving the Charlemagne Prize, with Europe, the focus has always been on space. From the very start, the typical action was to remove borders for goods, for workers, for investment, to let people and companies move, take initiatives, seize opportunities. But we have never really thought of Europe as a home, as a shelter, and today we pay the price for it. Europe, the friend of freedom and space, is seen as a threat, protection, and place. I think this is a very profound analysis and a very true one. If we are to prosper together, we must go beyond what we call the common market, to build a fairer and more social Europe, which accommodates everyone and their differences under a common umbrella based on our shared values. And nothing is more fundamental to the promotion of a fair society, fostering opportunity and a healthy sense of belonging than education. You're well placed to know this here. Last December, in 2017, in the European Council conclusions, the heads of state and government have, I think for the first time in history, underlined the high importance they now attach to education for Europe's future. Nowhere has this been more obvious, and that's why I feel very fortunate that I have this task at this stage, because it's the most crucial moment for investing and putting all our efforts into education, into your future. Our communication on building a stronger Europe, focused on the role of youth, culture, and education policies, is the Commission's vision for a European education area by 2025. The European education area wants to achieve 3 objectives. First, it wants to promote cross-border learning mobility. Erasmus, you know it, some of you already told me in the corridor that you have participated in Erasmus exchange, is arguably the most successful program in EU history. Yet, what is the percentage of students that have actually had the privilege to participate in it? Does anybody have an idea? A guess? 2%? You're not very far. 5%? It's 4%. It's 4%. You're spot on. This tells us something. What does it tell us? That this is the few that had the chance, and that most of the few come from very affluent parts of society because they had the possibility to be supported by their families into doing an Erasmus. This is not good enough. I want to do better. Second, the European education area wants to promote the free movement of learners. This means development of automatic recognition of diplomas between EU member states. Yes, we're not there yet. Amazingly, we're not there yet. As well as the promotion of multilingualism. And one of the reasons we're not there yet, the rector mentioned it in his introduction, is because the member states tell us, stay away, this is my business, it's not yours. But it's at the detriment of a better quality of education and at the detriment of what opportunities you can have for your future. So without wanting to step on the toes of any member state, on their competences, on their territory, we have to insist that they work together so that these borders come down. So we are encouraging the emergence of transnational alliances between higher education institutions. This is what we call European universities, and we have just launched a call under the Erasmus program for a first round of pilot projects where European universities will agree to come together and to form an alliances with common curricula, with exchanges of students, but not just a 6 months Erasmus exchange where you could go for law studies and study 1 year in Lyon, 1 year in Bratislava, and 1 year in Athens. So a real integration of the programs of the universities. Thirdly, the European education area wants to promote inclusive, innovation-driven lifelong learning. As an engineer, I'm very keen to stress that we are giving attention to motivating young people, and girls in particular, to engage in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You know, 4 decades ago, I decided to study engineering, and at the time, everybody was telling me, but this is a man's job. 4 decades later, we still haven't totally changed the narrative. So actually the rate of women that go into what we call STEM is not going up, it's going down, which is very worrying. And it's symptomatic of societies that still are in prison of the narratives of the you know, all preconceived ideas. So we need to get out of that. Very few people understand the need of an inclusive Europe that promotes the free movement of learners better than you, students of the College of Europe. The College of Europe is an institution entirely dedicated to advancing the cause of European integration. Your promotion is named after a visionary of the role of education in European integration, as we already heard. Manuel Marin, former Vice President of the European Commission, and one of the fathers of the Erasmus program, fought against all odds. You may not know, but Erasmus was not an easy birth. Now everybody, it's a success, and everybody wants to praise Erasmus and to take a share of the success, but it had not an easy birth. Some member states were fiercely opposed to it. And they came up with a proposal that completely altered the substance of the Commission's idea at the time, a program with no budget and no exchanges of students. Manuel Marin went then to the President of the European Commission, the very known Jacques Delors, and told him, in these conditions, I just withdraw my proposal. The Commission has the right of initiative to propose to the member states and to the parliament, but it also has the right to say, well, now my proposal is being so much changed, perverted, one could say even, that I just pull it back because whatever is happening is so far from what I had imagined that it's better not to do it at all. So Manuel Marin and Jacques Delors had the courage to do that. It was never done before. So member states had to give up and to accept. And there you had a moment of a choice, more Europe or no Europe at all. Had they chosen not the more Europe choice, we wouldn't be here talking today because the biggest success called Erasmus would never have existed. So in June 1987, we celebrated last year 30 years of Erasmus. The program was adopted only a few months before the academic year, and it started in a very fast, urgent way. In the first year, roughly 3,200 students from 12 member states participated. Today, the Erasmus Plus program supports 750,000 people a year from 33 countries, because it goes a bit beyond the EU member states, who study, train, and volunteer abroad. Last year, with the 30th anniversary, we celebrated 9 million participants to the program. Looking ahead, we have presented a proposal to the member states for a new Erasmus program from 2021-2027 for the new MFF, as we call it, the multi-annual financial framework. And we're asking to double the budget, to go from 15 billion for 7 years to 30 billion. With that, we're trying to have 3 times more beneficiaries, 3 times more people benefiting from Erasmus. And that would make, for the next 7 years, 12 million people. But the goal is not just to give you impressive figures. We want to reach beyond that. Erasmus shouldn't just be bigger, but it should be better. And that's where the most important part of it comes for me. It needs to be more inclusive so that we don't stay with the 4% that we mentioned earlier. For the free movement of all learners, irrespective of their background or their socioeconomic conditions. So not only do we need to do better what we do, not only do we need to communicate better on what we do best, but we also need to listen to the citizens so that we can better serve, include them, and make them feel part of this EU. In addition to making the program more inclusive, we wanted to support a democratic, forward-looking Europe. A Europe for all of us has to be a Europe which has a little bit of each of us. This is why, in addition to doubling Erasmus, we are proposing to increase also the budget of the Creative Europe program. This is our program funding cultural exchanges. Because through creativity and through expression of citizens, especially young citizens such as you, we can aspire at creating a truly diverse European identity that beckons us all to a common place, to a community. Those of you looking at diplomacy now know too well that the EU strategy for international cultural relations is promoting quite a shift from the traditional model of cultural diplomacy to people contacts, a bottom-up approach focusing on dialogue, to peer learning and to co-creation. By exploring the EU's cultural links to our neighbors, we can do much more together. We can promote a more harmonious understanding of our common cultural heritage, both inside and outside the EU. Ultimately, we can also show the world that building bridges brings us much further than building walls. As for Erasmus+, the international dimension of the Create Europe program has increased over the recent years. We have 13 non-EU countries signing an agreement to join our program, and the next generation of the program, post-2020, will invest more in the international dimension so that we give more possibilities to cooperate with third countries on the cultural field. As far as Europe's place in the world is concerned, one area of the globe should be particularly highlighted in this respect, and that continent is Africa. By 2050, the African population is expected to rise to 2.5 billion, mainly young people, and it will account for more than half of the world's population. At the same time, this continent is likely to experience significant effects of climate change. The way in which these changes are managed will determine the future of the continent, of Africa, and of the world. This is why we're committed to becoming a true and fair partner to Africa, creating opportunities for young Africans. Only then, only they can be the engines of the socio-economic development in their region. President Juncker proposed and promised in September to increase the number of African students that will benefit from Erasmus mobility to more than 100,000 by 2027, so in less than a decade. In fact, currently, already this year, we're doubling the number of student exchanges with 12 West African countries, because we want to start and to give a momentum to this action and not to wait for the next programming period. Our relations with Africa are important and need to start improving as from today. This is the way so that we don't have to manage in a few years another major crisis. We have instead to be able to enjoy the fruit of a solid partnership, which is not based on dependency, but which is connected by a viable bridge of mutual prosperity. Dear students, I come back to the title. 197 days left for the European elections. We are under no illusions. The polarization that we experience in national politics across the EU will be reflected into the new European Parliament. But you know, populism is popular until it is called to govern. As I often say, populism is duty-free. You know, it has no cost. Because responsibility comes with a cost. And as European Commission, we have a duty to offer stability and invest in what matters. Again, to build bridges at all costs. Now, that's our responsibility. There's also a little part that is your responsibility. It is to go and vote, of course. And it's also to encourage the people around you to vote. Your friends, your peers, your parents, your cousins, sometimes even our parents, older people who have been voting for years, have become disillusioned or desperate and feel nothing changes, so I'll stay at home. But that's the worst thing one can do, because abstention is not cost neutral. By abstaining, we are actively reinforcing those with whom we disagree, actually. We're giving them the space to influence our future. So if you don't want those with whom you disagree to influence your future, and if you don't want people, old people like me, decide on your future in your place, then you have to take the decisions in your hands. I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to any questions you may have.